Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Talent Playbook Podcast. My name is Jason Ferrara. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at OutMatch and your host for this podcast. Our podcast focuses on strategies for transforming your world of work. During each podcast, we'll highlight someone who's transformed their organization or industry in a significant way. Today's guest is Greg Moran. He's the CEO of OutMatch, which means, number one, he's my boss. Number two, he is my nutrition coach for workouts. So I didn't know if you knew that, but you do.
That's good to
serve
know.
in that capacity for me as well.
Didn't know I was that important, but all right, I'm glad to hear it. Your life is in my hands.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
During our time today, Greg, I wanted to go through a number of questions. They're going to range from the personal to the professional. But before we get into more specifics about that, go ahead and describe OutMatch. Not every listener is going to understand who we are and what we do.
Sure, yeah. OutMatch basically provides predictive analytics, so data that you want about candidates that you're hiring. We work with, been really fortunate to work with some really large companies and well-known, some of the best brands in the world, companies like American Airlines and Hyatt Hotels and Subway restaurants and a lot of others to really help them identify high potential candidates out of large talent pools and be able to screen them more effectively and develop them over the long-term relationship that person, once they come on with that company, is going to have with the organization.
Cool. Good. Thanks. So I've already said that you're the CEO of OutMatch, but describe for me a little bit about that job and how long you've been doing the job.
So I've been the CEO of OutMatch for about just over 2 years now. OutMatch is actually was formed as a merger of two companies. Company that I founded way back seems like an eternity ago, back in 2009, called Checked.com, and a company here where we're sitting today in Dallas called Assess Systems. So we got together with a private equity firm out in Palo Alto who called Trident Capital, who helped us bring the organizations together. We did that back in January of 2015. So been the CEO of OutMatch ever since then. And I've also was the CEO of the predecessor company, Checked.com, back from 2009 or something. And that was pretty much from the stage of a startup.
And was that your first time as a CEO?
No.
Checked.com?
So Checked was actually my third startup. I had two prior. One way back in that we started in 1997, called Pinnacle Technology Solutions. It was a executive search and staffing company focused on primarily we placed mostly IT related talent for internet startups at the time, and for those of you who are listening that have been around for a little while, from back to Y2K.
The end of the world, right?
Yeah, the end of the world, right. So we were placing the developers on staff at our clients to basically try to remediate Y2K problems. So between that and, the internet bubble, it was a great time. It was a great business in 97 and 98, 99, 2000. The problem was with the Y2K bubble, the world didn't end, but all of our contracts did.
Right.
So it ended for us, but not for everybody else. So that was my first foray into a CEO. And I had a interim, then I was CEO of another company between there.
Got it. So this is a question I was going to ask later, but it seems appropriate to ask now. So, what has changed, not only in business in general, but for you as a CEO since starting a business in 1997 and now working in a business as a CEO in 2017? Like, what are some of the big changes you've seen?
I think if I look at it from the lens of a startup entrepreneur, it's easier than ever in a lot of ways to start a business today, and which I think is a great thing. And I think that has changed the way, as a CEO of a more mature company today, we have to look at the world, right? Because we have competitors coming in that 6 months ago they didn't exist, but because you can really go from an idea and a PowerPoint to getting some technology commercialized today faster than you've ever been able to do it, which makes a little bit larger organizations, and we're certainly by no means large, but a larger organization like ours, you really you have to have a level of adaptability and flexibility in a different way than I think, back in, say, 97 when we were starting Pinnacle. It was still hard. You still had to have physical offices. You still had to buy things like phone systems that and you had hardware. Computers were expensive and things like that. When we first started that first company, I spent $2,500, which was my, basically my entire life savings at the time, on a desktop PC. And that was the cost of a desktop PC, right? So you ordered the big, Gateway PC from Gateway, right? And it showed up in the big cow box, and that was it, right? And so I think that it's really democratized the way that a company can start and the speed that a company can start, which particularly in a fairly dynamic market like HR tech, like we're in, it makes you watch. It makes companies better, I think, because you can, just the pace at which other companies can come on the market.
Why do you think the HR tech space is growing so quickly? We talk about, obviously, technology is something you just mentioned, but what is it about the HR tech space? And we just finished a time at the HR Tech Expo and conference in Las Vegas this year, and it is still as vibrant as it's ever been there.
Yeah, I'd say. I mean, I've seen that show grow, man, from it's probably quintupled or more in size in just the past, probably the 10 years or so that I've been going to it.
Yeah.
So, I think the way that companies are looking at their talent is different, and we've seen digitization and we've seen technology come into every other department of a company where CEOs and C-level executives within an organization are starting to demand more now from HR, right? It was kind of that last bastion. If you think about, the way that companies manage their supply chain software, right? And there's incredible technology for that today. And look at what Salesforce.com has done for the CRM space, right? Which is now kind of the system of record for many companies, us included, right? So you start to see the way that technology has infiltrated the deep operations of organizations, and HR, it's still behind, and it was horribly behind. But I think really it's kind of that last place where CEOs and and executive teams are starting to demand more than just managing benefits policies and administrative policies, but really saying, how do we do this better? How do we engage our talent on a different level than we have before? How do we hire so it's not a guessing game every time, right? But how do we apply real science to our hiring process? How do we apply real data, real analytics to help us identify the right person? How do we use that data and those analytics to help us keep this person engaged, keep them happy, keep them performing at a high level, right? So I think it's just kind of the natural progression that organizations have gone through, and HR just happened to, I think, be really the last place that it hit within most companies.
Yeah, I mean, if I think about my career specifically in marketing, that shift had already happened in marketing. It was beginning at the start of my career, probably halfway through. It was, well, where's the data on which you make the decision to attend this show, send this piece of mail, right, at the beginning of my career, to send the email at the later end of my career here.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you look at the importance that using data plays in like you said, in making marketing decisions. You look at the importance of using data in, say, a sales organization, right? I mean, you talk to most successful executives in marketing and data, and they're going to be able to recite kind of every metric that are really critical for the success of their, marketing campaigns or their pipeline conversion rates or things like that, right? In HR, for a long time, when you would ask an HR team, what are the critical drivers of your success as an HR department or as a recruiting function or something, you were getting really nebulous things that, things like I love to pick on like time to hire, right? I mean, it's an important metric because obviously you want that time to be.
You need that time to be short, right? There's competition.
You need it to be short, right? But it doesn't really drive organizational performance in the way that really focusing in on, yes, I hired this person quickly, but I have no idea if they're working out or not. right? And I, as the recruiter, may not be incentivized at all for the long-term success of that person. So I think it's, but it's different than what you've seen in most other departments, right? Where certainly CFOs can recite the key metrics for their business, VPs of sales, VPs of marketing, but that hasn't traditionally been the place within HR. It's been far more kind of personal human contact side of it, which is obviously really important, but being able to really use that as a driver for organizational performance is really the direction that things are moving today.
So now you get to recite the three most key metrics for this organization.
For OutMatch?
Yeah, for OutMatch. What are those three that you really look at to run the business?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the first thing is, we are a SaaS, or software as a service, software subscription model, right? So the biggest metric that we look at there for our performance is the growth of our recurring revenue. The beauty of a software as a service model is that our clients purchase annual or multi-year licenses from us, and that becomes a very recurring and predictable revenue stream. So from my position, that's what I watch all the time, is that growth. I think, the other thing obviously is we can't do this without having a great team to execute. So something around employee, we're constantly looking at employee satisfaction data. Now we do that on a very frequent basis. So once a week, we have just to kind of give them a plug, we use a program called 15.5, which is great technology for this. It's an engagement technology. And so that every week, every one of our employees, every one of our team members here are completing a survey about their own feelings about their work that week, right? So and we watch the trending on that all the time to make sure that people are upbeat, they're positive about what's going on, they're feeling good about the direction of the business. And if there's not, we start to ask questions, right? But we can do that on a near-term basis. And the other thing I think, and I know this one is near and dear to your heart, is NPS, right? And as kind of a proxy metric for how satisfied are our clients, and are they actually helping us build this business? Yep. And then there's probably another dozen that we look at beside that that are pretty SaaS technology specific, but I mean, those are really the kind of big three. I think if you had to boil it down, I could only look at three. Those are probably the three. It would tell me, are my clients healthy? Is our team healthy? And is our revenue?
And is our business healthy?
Right. Yeah.
And those, I think, also focus on employees, right? Your revenue growth is a function of sales and product and support and all the pieces internally that make things work. The reason that people pay us to use the product, right? So that's a very employee-driven metric as well. So I think one of the things that you and I talk about is just making sure that the things we measure are actually connected to people. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
And that this is a people business, and we're trying to connect people with a job and a company with a better person and an understanding of how to get better people.
Yep.
And continually improve that process.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to ask a question about just generally your day, right? We've just covered a lot. We've just covered a lot of ground, right? The sort of history from 1997 till now, the metrics that you look at, it's all a pretty diverse set of stuff that, because I know you, I know what your day is like and how busy you are. But I'd be interested to just have you talk to people about this. This is what a day in the life of Greg is like, and how you make time for people in the business.
Yeah. I think it depends. So I live in Colorado and I work in Dallas, which creates an interesting scheduling challenge on occasion. So sometimes my day starts or ends with a plane ride, or I have one stuck right in the middle of the afternoon, which as I do right after we're finishing today. I think I'm big. You sort of joked about this. I'm big on fitness, and I think starting my day, kind of getting a workout in the morning is about the most. It's probably I don't want to. It sounds funny to say that's probably the most important part of the day, but it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the day. And if I screw that part up, like I did this morning, for instance, if I don't get that part right, the rest of the day doesn't seem to flow quite the same way. So, From there, I really try to, set aside time to just. I think one of the biggest challenges with what I do is there's often not enough time to just kind of think about really where I'm supposed to be focusing. I know you and I are both big fans of the book, The One Thing, which, I'd certainly recommend for anybody to read. And I try to practice that as much as I can, for the first few hours of the day. And then, from there, it's working with our sales team, it's working with our marketing team, it's working with our research team and our services team, and on just whatever projects we've got going on at that given moment. But I think I'm really big on trying to boil things down to some pretty definable, just a very small set of definable goals, both on an annual basis, on a quarterly basis, and then just trying to stay as close to on track with those things. And really, I think the big thing with my job is trying to figure out what that right balance of being completely in the way or actually being helpful. And I don't always get that part right, but if I can,
I don't think anybody.
That's right.
Not just you.
Yeah. So really, but it's really about. I think it's getting the workout in, and then it's trying to set aside a few hours in the morning before the rest of the day kind of gets. The rest of the day will sort of be dictated by what I can accomplish in the morning, and that's the most important part for me.
Well, you mentioned the one thing, and just to me, there's a part in that book which is key to that program in thinking about what's most important is almost more important than even figuring out what the one thing is. It's setting time aside to work on that one thing.
That's right.
It's
yeah.
the time in the morning that you work out and have to think. It's that whenever you plan that block of time, making sure you don't move that around so you don't focus on that one thing.
That's right. Yeah. And I think, for me, getting a workout in first in the morning actually allows me to figure out what that one thing is for the day, where, what can I do that day to advance my, whatever it is that I'm working on that week or that month or, whatever period of time that is. Right. And if I can use that time when I'm working out in the morning to kind of figure out what that one thing is for that day. And then I can use that time block, set aside to actually do it. That's the, I think that to me sets the tone, and not every day works perfectly like that, right? I mean, a lot of them just kind of they get away from you from the get go, but I really try to stick to that as much as I can.
So there's a pattern emerging here in my notes, right? The three big key metrics, the one thing you try to do in the morning, this focusing on the one thing. It's this concept of maybe simplifying isn't the right word, but defining exactly what it is that needs to be done and working toward those goals, not letting noise get in the way.
I think one of the big things that I've seen in my career and where I've seen sort of people who have been enormously successful that I've worked with and people who have just constantly struggled is, I think, and I talk about this with my kids all the time too. It's actually putting time into strategy and planning. And I think whether that means, it's kind of like the old contractor model, right? That like the more time you spend taping the room before you paint it, the less time you're going to take in painting the room, right? And it's that same kind of thing. And I think that's one of the, and again, I'm not perfect at this by any stretch, but something I try to continue to remind myself, the more time I take to figure out the next steps, the less time those steps are actually going to take me, right? And that's why, it's three goals. It's the one thing. It's really just trying to simplify it down to a level that, quite honestly, I can understand and manage. It's not that others can. It's that when it gets too complicated and it gets kind of beyond that, I lose track. There's just too many pieces to manage at that point.
So let's talk a little bit about things you're in your career you're really proud of, and things in your career that haven't gone the way you intended them to go, and sort of lessons from that. So first, let's talk about something that hasn't gone the way you intended it to go, and what lesson you took from that.
Well, the first company that I joked about. So like I said, we started in '97. We went from that $2,500 laptop that I spent literally the life savings of my wife and I on.
But I bet she was thrilled.
she was particularly thrilled because we got married on December 27th of 1997. And I started that business like a couple days later. So she was now married to an unemployed guy who spent every last penny she had.
Right.
Which I think I'm sure impressed her parents as well. 20 years later, we're still married. But so, we went from that to really a multi-million-dollar business in a relatively short period of time. And it's not because we were so smart. It's because the market was just powering everything, right? So the internet bubble was inflating. Things were really there was just so much money. I mean, you remember if you remember that time, pets.com and sort of all of this, the internet, the Super Bowl commercials and all these companies, right? So, I mean, the bubble was inflating. Things were getting just massive. And you had this Y2K issue looming, right? There was so much money flowing into technology. It was unbelievable. So we literally went from this flat-footed startup where we had spent our life savings on it to really a multi-million-dollar business in just a few years. Then we got to around 2000 and the bubble burst, right? And Y2K ended and all the money flowed back out of technology, internet startups in the same way it flowed in, right? Which was really fast. And the business was gone. I mean, we effectively went from nothing to about 8 million in revenue to back to, nothing again, except we had, 50 employees or so at the time. I was about 27, I think, something like that when that happened. It was probably the most painful business experience I've ever had, but it was probably the best business experience I've ever had. And I think, it's one of those things that clearly didn't work out the way that I wanted it to. But nothing I've ever done has taught me more about, what sustainable growth looks like in a business and how not to get that far over your skis, right? Which is really easy to do. The market, I think, and there may be a little bit of this today, right? That's out there. I don't think it's a bubble anywhere near what it was, but a really fast and really powerfully growing market can make a lot of mediocre players look like geniuses, and it sometimes can be hard to kind of flush the difference out between the two. So it was an enormously powerful experience for me, one I'll certainly never forget, and one that has lessons that reverberate almost daily, in different things that we do.
Yeah. So you talked about learning to understand what sustainable growth means. So what are some of the things you do today to think about what sustainable growth means and try to accelerate OutMatch into a company where we really are generating some sustainable growth?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is trying to figure out when to step on the gas and when to tap the brake, right? And it's trying to really figure out, do I have this right? We talk internally about scalability all the time, right? And we talk about it with our clients from their people strategy, right? Can you build a scalable strategy to hire at the volume that you need to hire for a company, right? If you're, a major airline, do you have a strategy in place that really allows you to hire, say, flight attendants at the pace that you need to hire them, but also at the quality that you need to hire them? Or does it all break down? Because very often you find one side breaks down to the other. You're not getting enough people, or you're just getting not the right people, right? So finding that balance is a really hard thing. And it's the same thing within a company, right? So, being able to understand when do I really step on the gas because we're seeing signs of something really starting to break. Seems like we've figured out, one piece of the business, so let's really step on the brakes. But being able to be patient enough to say, I don't think we have the balance right yet, right? I don't think we've got this thing figured out. Let's go a little slower. Let's keep testing. Let's keep collecting data until we really feel like we've got something that scales, whether that's a marketing campaign or it's our sales efforts or it's our services model or implementations model or something like that, to kind of keep the brake down a little bit until you kind of figure it out and then immediately step on the gas. And I think that's always a really hard balance, but it's one that if you don't get right, you can really find yourself spending a whole lot of money on stuff that doesn't work.
So you mentioned sales and you mentioned marketing there, and you did talk a little bit about the human capital strategy, but I would imagine that's one of the reasons that the HR tech industry is growing too, right? So you said earlier, the executive suite is demanding more metrics from a human capital perspective. This, do I step on the gas, do I tap the brake, is really a human capital issue as well.
Absolutely.
As technology powering that. The ability to make those decisions.
Sure. Yeah. As companies grow, right, the ability to drive talent into the organization becomes, even more strategic than it already was, and not losing your people once you have them, right? That is really pushing heavily on the space today. That's why you see a lot of sourcing companies really cropping up, because our clients are our clients, and every other company is having trouble just identifying people, right? I mean, which is ironic. When I first started my career in recruiting, I mean, everything was like in your own personal Rolodex, right? Today, really, any company theoretically has access to anybody, but being able to identify that right talent and engage that right talent early in the process is really hard. It's why you see assessments really growing, right? Because once you get that person in, you really want to be able to identify very quickly it's a high potential candidate or low potential candidate. But all of those things are really focused on, they're powered by the growth of the company. When companies are hiring, it's a great time for HR tech.
Great. All right, I think we have time for two more questions. So we talked about the book, The One Thing. What are two of your other top favorite books?
I would say my favorite other business book would be The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. So it's Pat Lencioni. And it's just a fantastic model for identifying what a high-performing team looks like. It's very simple. I love Pat's books because I can read them on a 2-hour plane ride. Right. Because they tell, but if you haven't read Lencioni's books, I mean, they're told as parables. Right. They're fictional stories, but very, very fast reads, but enormously powerful. And Five Dysfunctions of a Team is incredible. I think on the personal side, it was funny. I've read this book probably 6 times, and I just started reading it again this weekend. It was just like laying there, which is Man's Search for Meaning, which is
that's a great book.
Yeah, which is another incredible story. So that's one there's not a lot of books where I just continue to go back to them and read them again. And sometimes just reading a chapter or a few pages. But that's an incredible book. Again, for anybody who's not familiar with it, it's about a Nazi concentration camp survivor who basically got himself through the concentration camp by trying to learn everything he could about what was happening to him so he could tell the story. So the story is about him preparing to tell the story, which is just enormously powerful, right? It's an amazing book.
Yeah. I actually bought that in an airport bookstore. Mm-hmm. It tells you a little bit about how popular that book is in general and how widespread it is. And it's a fantastic read.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. It's one that every kid, I think, like teens and, it's just, it's certainly anything but a kid's book, but I mean, it's just one that, everybody should read it once because it has that kind of impact on your life.
I also think that about Five Dysfunctions of a Team. Actually, it's it can be that powerful and important. And I don't know if it's a Lencioni concept or if it's a agile software methodology concept, but this notion of doing a daily stand up with your team. Right. It's short. It's just a touch base. That's one of the most powerful concepts I think. That Lencioni talks about. And mm-hmm. I know it's a great touch point for our team as we go through the week too.
Absolutely.
All right. So time for one more question. So what advice would you give to someone starting their career in human capital?
If you are, so I'm assuming we're talking about on the company side, right? Somebody who wants to make a career in HR.
That's right.
I think being able to get an education, know what a balance sheet is, right? Know what an income statement is. Take some basic financial, even if you're long out of college, take some online classes. Really learn what what the mechanics of a business are on an operational financial level. And I think one of the things that separates, in my view, extraordinary HR executives from not, right, would be their ability to really tie the impact that their talent has to an organization. What are the things that I'm doing? I mean, all of this stuff, it's all very altruistic. And I think what gravitates people into HR is because it really is a feel-good business, right? It really is about people, and it's about helping people. And all of that is fantastic. And we shouldn't lose that. But at the same time, you want to be able to quantify the impact that you're having or your programs are having on those real, I would say, top line, even more than bottom line performance of a company. How do the programs I'm putting in place help drive revenue for my business? As a CEO, as a investor in other companies, as a board member in other companies, I want to understand how we're going to grow. And I want to understand through that growth, how is our ability as an organization to recruit more effectively, to retain our talent more effectively, to engage that talent more effectively? What impact is that really having? So I think the biggest advice I would have would be learn some basic financial literacy around a company. There's online classes you can take. I think the other thing is around data and data science, right? If you don't have that skill set today, learn basic data visualization and data analysis. Because one of the things we see all the time is with what we do and talking to other HR technology executives, I think one of the common things we hear all the time is like, it's how do you build a business case for what you want to try to do, right? And for investments that you want to make in your people, because these are good things, but we can't just simply rely on the intrinsic value. We've got to be able to build a business case. And I think all of those things through data visualization, through basic financial literacy, corporate financial literacy, I think really will help that.
Great. Yeah, that and it's what we were talking a little bit about before. It's sort of a maturation process of the human capital function, right? Making sure that it's not only connected with the financial foundation of the business, but it is one of the key drivers of growth.
That's right.
And we talk to a lot of our clients who are trying to accomplish that.
Mm-hmm.
How does my talent? I know my talent helps this business grow. How do I show people that? How do I replicate that? And how do I really use that as a tool for growth?
That's right.
That's right. Great. Thanks. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I know you're hopping on a plane, so I really appreciate the time. And I also want to thank our production crew for today. We've got Charles Summers in the booth, and we had Matt Rogers here troubleshooting the microphones and computers. So thanks to those guys. Until next time, this is Jason Ferrara from OutMatch. Looking forward to having you join us for the next Talent Playbook podcast. Thanks for listening.